Sounds good.
All right, so we're joined from Laurel, Mississippi by Dr. Roslyn. So you go by Dr. Ross. So we appreciate you joining us. This is our college and career readiness class. I've got a room full of seniors here with me at Velma Jackson High School, recording this for all of our friends in Madison County Schools, Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So we thank you so much for joining us today. And we're going to talk about some real issues when it comes to mental health and trauma and relationships for especially kids transitioning out of high school. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your background and your college background, because you are from Ellisville, Mississippi, and graduate of Jackson State as well.
I am. I am from Ellisville. I'm a two-time graduate from Jackson State University. I also have a PhD from the University of Southern Miss. My love and my passion is counseling. So I've been a therapist since 2000. I'm about to give something away I don't want to give away. 2007. And I've actually been in private practice since 2020.
Wow. And we'll talk about entrepreneurship as well, because I think that's a path a lot of these kids want to take and they don't understand what goes into it. Now, to become, and I know you are a licensed professional counselor, and it varies from state to state on how that happens. So talk a little bit about the requirements for that, because on top of the degree, there are hours required as well.
Absolutely. So with licensed professional counselor, you guys can go a couple of tracks. You could get your PhD in psychology, which is from a master's degree. That's 5 years. Then there's internship and you have to take an exam. The route that I went, LPC, you still finish a master's program, which is a 60-hour training. So it's about 2.5 years to complete your master's degree. And then you enter into the workforce. So I started out at an agency working with students as a school-based clinician. And I use that time to get hours. So you have to get 3,000 hours and you have to be supervised. So we take this very seriously. We're dealing with people's emotional and mental wellness. So you don't want just anyone randomly giving advice, which is what a lot of people think that counseling is about. But we are trained to treat and diagnose mental health disorders from moderate to severe. So you go through the training, you get supervised, and then on top of all of that, once you're ready, you can sit for an exam. So the exam allowed me to become a licensed professional counselor after completing all those courses. And I am licensed in 3 states, so I do have a unique perspective of how that works. The field of counseling is a little behind as it relates to psychologists, because psychologists have what we call reciprocity, which means they can go from one state to another, kind of similar to a psychiatrist or a medical doctor, and go through just a few steps to get a license to practice in that state. We have to submit all of our coursework. You have to take the exam. You have to go through hours to become licensed in that state. And so they're just now kind of coming around to the point where they're honoring reciprocity. I am licensed in the state of Texas, and I also have reciprocity in Florida, which means because I'm licensed in Mississippi, all I had to do was submit some paperwork. And as long as I maintain my licensure, which maintaining, that's a whole other thing, but I'll just give a small tip, because I just got done with maintaining licensure in Texas. You have to go back through. It's always learning. So you have to go back through, take additional classes, submit that so that you can renew your licensure every 2 years.
Absolutely. Now, before we get into the real mental health side of things, we do want to briefly hit on being an entrepreneur, because we have several students here and that'll watch this later that have shown interest in entrepreneurship, whether it's part-time entrepreneurship or full-time entrepreneurship. And I think it is an attractive thing because people see the glamorous part of it. They see the Instagram post, they hear, and I know they get sick of me talking about this. I'm a huge fan of Jasmine Sullivan, but in her song, she talks about, like, I'm just going to make a bunch of money and move to Atlanta and be rich. And it doesn't work like that. And a regular guest of our class is Dr. Angela Shannon in Jackson, or she's in Flowood, and she's a GI doctor. And she said, look, I learned everything about my field in college. I learned everything about how to take care of patients, but I never learned how to run a business. And the learning curve was catastrophic. Now she's doing great, but she said the
Yeah.
learning curve for the first several months was not what she expected. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. So talk a little
Yeah.
bit about the struggles you faced as a not only just a business owner, but a Black female business owner in Mississippi.
Yes. Thank you for that question. Because I am Black, I used to think that people would not want to be serviced by me. I grew up seeing white female therapists like on TV, or you see a very older white male as your psychiatrist, and they ask weird questions and you're just uncomfortable with answering those questions. So I thought that I would be at a disadvantage. Within the past 10 years or so, my fear of starting my own business decreased each year. And I realized that if I wanted to stay in the state of Mississippi and eat, I needed to branch out on my own. Okay.
Yeah.
It was a process because there's this fear to take this leap because there's so much that's unknown. We didn't learn this at Jackson State at all. Nobody teaches you how to be an entrepreneur. It's inside of you, and you have to take the necessary steps to learn about it. And that's exactly what I did. After I finished my licensure at an agency and realized that the agency world was not for me, I don't like systems. I want to be able to just freely give and serve the people that I want to serve. Okay. So nobody wants to in agencies, they don't want to talk about love and relationships, and that's a big part of what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So from there, I started working at a group private practice, and that was that moment where I began to learn and pay attention to what they were doing. I was paying attention to what technology they were using. I was paying attention to everything, like how they have the room set up. Where is this couch? What do you say? How do you do this? And so I was able to just look at all of that. I also sold insurance one year because I was like, if I can sell insurance to somebody, I can sell myself as a therapist.
There you
So I
go.
did a lot of those different things. And I would say to those of you who are thinking about entrepreneurship, to find yourself a great mentor, somebody that you don't have to learn everything from scratch like many of us did. I would, to this day, if I don't know the answer, I'm going to Google, the Bible Google, or I'm going to go on YouTube, or I'm going to find me a good person who's five steps ahead of me so that I can ask them those questions.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we got to talk briefly about that. But we really want to talk about today the mental health crises that these kids coming out of high school are going to face, whether it's relationship based, whether it's trauma, whether it's anxiety in college or starting a new career, moving away from home. These are all things that are going to be faced. Now, it's no secret, and it's been widely spread and widely talked about in the last few years that for a long time in the Black community, a lot of these things were kind of pushed under the rug or kind of acted like they didn't exist. And you've done a lot of things to change that. You specialize in Black female issues, even though what you deal with could apply to everybody. You really have that niche, and you deal with relationships, whether it's with parents, siblings, loved ones, and you deal a lot with anxiety. And we've had some other people talk about how to deal with that because these kids are graduating from high school in 5 months, and whether they want to believe it or not, those stressors are going to happen. So talk a little bit about that and, some of the things that are going to happen and ways to deal with that and ways, and some of the things that you've told some of your clients.
Oh, sure. So anytime you go through a major transition in your life, whether it is moving from middle school to high school to college, college to your first real job, starting a relationship, getting married, having a baby, um, witnessing a parent or a loved one pass away, there is a moment in time where you're in the middle of something and we call it that gap. All right. In that gap, you don't know what to do during that time. And sometimes you feel anxious. All right. You feel fear. How am I going to get through this? You may even feel some sadness or darkness or depression, or you might even what I've seen some young people who are like, I guess around that 2021 age, like transitioning, they're like, I thought my life was gonna look this way,
Yeah.
but it doesn't. Now it looks this way. All right. And if I can be totally, completely transparent, when I was in high school, I had a plan. I knew who I was going to marry. I knew when I was going to marry. I knew what I wanted. Like, I knew all of those things. And we broke up in college. And we don't talk about that. Like, the person that you're becoming and transitioning to becoming may not be in alignment with the person that you were dating in high school. How do you
Absolutely.
deal with that reality that it's different? How do you deal with the reality that I am now trying to excel in school and I'm changing? So there is a disorder that we have in the DSM-4, which is our diagnostic statistical manual, which is what I use to diagnose people, and it's called adjustment disorder. You could have adjustment disorder and be perfectly fine. You're just trying to transition from one phase to the other. Your adjustment disorder may have a lot of anxiousness because, like, again, like I mentioned, I'm worried, I have fear, I don't know how this is going to work out. Or you could have adjustment disorder with depressed mood, which is I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I feel hopeless because things are transitioning. Okay. Or you could have a mixture of anxiety and depressed mood. Okay. So that would be the diagnosis, and
Yeah.
you guys can look that up in your spare time. Adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood. But what do you do about it? And how do you survive adjustment? Well, in life, we all are going to have some adjustment we're having to deal with. And one thing that I want to share with you is if you can remember another time where you have been through something similar and you can think about how you move through that time, that is the basis of resilience, which means that if I'm resilient, I'm able to bounce back from something that's brought me down. But we do that by remembering the other times that we've been brought down by something and what we did to come back up to surface. And a lot of times that's what I do with my clients. I help them to remember that even though this is ending to a relationship. Do you remember when you lost your dog? Or do you remember when you moved to another house and you were so filled with grief and sadness, you didn't know how you were going to get over that? Remember that? What did you do? Okay. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we need to, as a whole, develop lifelong coping skills and strategies. We need to get okay with understanding that you don't have to be strong every time you go through something different. You can't replace people or things, so you do have to go through a natural grieving
Yep.
process. So yeah, that's what I would recommend. A lot of times, and I'll say this and I'll pause. A lot of people they end up making permanent decisions because of the temporary adjustments that they're going through, sometimes ending their life because they didn't have those coping skills in place. So I would say find those coping skills that can buffer between you and what's stressing you out.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to what I want to talk about next because, like we
Mhm.
said, for so long there was so much stigma, and unfortunately there still is. But it is completely normal to seek therapy. Every single person on this planet is at risk of mental stressors, of trauma, and of anxiety and depression. It's I always say it's the ultimate equalizer. It doesn't care what color you are or what gender you are. It's something that
No.
you're going to face because life is hard for everybody, no matter who you are. So I think it's important for young people to understand that no matter what their next step is after high school, seeking that help can only benefit you. And you hear people say, "Well, I can't afford it." There's all kinds of ways that you can reach out and find people that will be there to help. So, so talk about that because I have therapists before that say, "Look, I have a therapist too, and I'm a therapist." So,
Mhm.
uh, so talk about the how it helps people to talk about things instead of bottling it up and then causing even more stress.
Absolutely. I think that this generation is more on board and more accepting of therapy than previous youth in other generations before. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that you guys, y'all have some huge goals, things that you want to do. And I just think that we've been having this conversation for quite a while about mental health, that I've had people just to call me and say, "What? I want to talk to you because I think I may have imposter syndrome, or my boyfriend broke up and I need to get over him." And so the more young people are reaching out for therapy. Here's the thing too about access to it. Absolutely right. Some people don't access therapy when they need it. They wait until they are just down in despair and it's gotten so severe to where they cannot manage it. Be one of the people that is okay with just reaching out, just phone consultation. I do a free 15-minute phone consultation. It won't solve all of your problems, but it might point you in the right direction. Okay. We do have free mental health services at different agencies. There are grants that help people get the treatment that they need. And so look around, go on Psychology Today, but do not do anything, because not doing anything is just going to make whatever you're dealing with worse. If you come from a strong supportive system, to me, that is almost therapy as well. But at any time you find that you don't really know the answers, or you keep running into people that want to give you advice, and you really want to have that mirror reflect back to you so that you can grow, that's a great time to seek therapy.
Yeah, and you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because another thing is that all these colleges, at least the ones in Mississippi that I know, have mental health service for students for free on campus. And you're already paying enough to go there. You might as well make use of the money you're spending. And especially for some first generation college students, whether even if you grew up at an all black high school like Velma Jackson and then go to an HBCU, you can still face imposter syndrome with people that look like you, because you may be surrounded by people that are legacy students at Jackson State or Alcorn or Mississippi Valley, and yet you're the only first generation college student there. You can be looked down on. Or if you had a PWI, I always say, I didn't think I didn't belong, but it's overwhelming to be in a room with 500 people in an auditorium where there's a class. I don't care how big your school is. It can be a hard adjustment to get used to. So more and more, and even in some of these people that want to get to the workforce, they offer free mental health counseling for their employees as part of their benefits. So reaching
Absolutely.
out and using things like that is so important. And you mentioned imposter syndrome, because one thing we really hit on here is because, especially with the new directions of employment, there's more technical jobs, there's more robotics, AI, engineering jobs. It's not like when it was our grandparents working. The manual labor
Right.
jobs are getting less and less. This is a hardworking community, and even the ones that'll see this later, Madison, Ridgeland, even their parents, those jobs that they had are going away. So these new careers people are stepping into, there's a good chance they could be the only person that looks like them there. So, that the imposter syndrome can really make you think you don't belong when you put in the work and you've done the training while you were in high school and college.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that, that as the workforce shifts and roles begin to change, sometimes we do question, do I belong here? Should I be here? Those of us who have been born into families where we are the first person to go to college are more likely to experience some level of imposter syndrome. You also may be more likely to experience imposter syndrome if you are in a culture of a job where you do not feel supported. That could be a job and that could be a school. I will say that being in a supportive environment does work really well for people who may be experiencing imposter syndrome. But ultimately, there's going to have to be a shift mentally and emotionally, and that's how therapy steps in and helps you to figure if this is imposter syndrome, because I'm not here to diagnose, but is it imposter syndrome? Is it something else? Is it general anxiety that you're experiencing? Is it depression that you're experiencing? Is it workplace racial trauma that you're experiencing? Because sometimes you feel left out because you actually are being left out. And so sometimes even your previous experiences at another place that has nothing to do with your new job may cause you to isolate yourself, and then you put yourself out, and so then you feel left out. So does that make sense? Like you're kind of
Uh,
continuing that cycle, Yeah. And so it would help to what therapy does is help for you to break the cycle of distorted thinking so that you can really sift through and figure out what this really is about for you.
Absolutely. Now I do want to get to these questions because they're asking some deep stuff, and I want to get to as many of these as I can.
Okay.
These are all senior,
Okay.
all seniors, all just 5 months away from graduation. This first one is Catherine Johnson, and she asked, "What do you think is the best way to deal with a past trauma that still affects you in the present?"
Therapy. Yeah, therapy. I mean, I think one of the greatest things about therapy is that you don't know until you get into what you need to be working on. So the reason why I say that is because I never just imagine, guys, if you were driving in a car, you had a car accident, and then you went to the doctor and the doctor said, I know what it is. Let me go ahead and put a cast on this right leg. And then you're like, but it was my left leg that was affected. So in therapy, we never do anything. I never make any recommendations without giving you a thorough assessment. And that means we're going to ask hard questions. We're going to ask about your medical history, your previous family history. We'll talk about the past trauma. And I only deal with trauma if it's affecting you right now. And if you know that it's affecting you right now, then this is the perfect time for you to seek help. If you're on your parents' insurance, like if your parents have insurance, you have access to their insurance until you're 26. So that's amazing. You have access to tons of resources. So now is the time to go ahead and get that assessment done because, and then I'll try to, for the sake of time, the thing about trauma, if it's interfering with your life right now, it's going to keep affecting you in different areas of your life. It will affect you at work. It will affect your relationships. It will affect your family relationships. It'll affect your social life. And that's when it's time for you to say, hey, it's not them, it's me. So go get an assessment.
Absolutely. This is a great question. This is Tashanti Levy. She's a member of our band here. Wants to go to Talladega College next year, so we'll hope that works out for her. But she's going to do great things regardless. She said, "How did you struggle with your own mental health growing up?"
I did not. In all honesty, I did not struggle with my own mental health growing up. I did not struggle with mental health until I was 23 years old. 23. So I came from a healthy family, two-parent household, summer vacations. I mean, it was just great. I saw my cousin get married when I was 11 years old. And from that moment, I said, I'm getting married when I'm 23, just like she got married at 23. And the thing that happened, I was 22 when my cousin got killed in a car accident. And I was 23 when my on again, off again boyfriend married somebody else. So now we got mental health issues. So I was dealing with grief and well, both of them were grief and it turned complicated, turned into depression. I was in a mental hospital, guys, for 2 weeks. And I couldn't talk
Wow.
about it then, but I talk about it now. The doctors told me that I would be crazy. I would never get off my medication. And the nurses looked at me and they said, she was such a bright student. She had a 4.0 in her program, and now her life is over. And so, for me as a therapist, never count anybody out, which is what I do. I never count anybody out. This is not a recommendation for you because I don't know how your life is set up, but I did get off medication. I did go back to school. I got my master's. I got a PhD. I started my practice and I work with people to just prove to them that don't do that. You can't count anybody out. So that would have been my experience. Thank you so much for asking that.
Yeah, that's a great one. I like this one too. This is Michaela Davis, one of our volleyball players here. Just got accepted into Southern Miss. Wants to be a nurse.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
she asked, how do you go about helping someone who is afraid to speak about a traumatic situation?"
Mm, Good question. I personally understand that fear will cripple you from accomplishing your greatest dreams. And so for me as a therapist, everything that we do is voluntary. So first of all, you would have to reach out to me first to let me know that you want to do the work. The second thing is confidentiality. So everything that we discuss will be confidential unless you threaten to hurt someone or hurt yourself. And the third thing is I don't pry into your life. This is something that we're all sensitive about. And so would allow you to let the truth unfold for you and help where I can help. So if this is a question about you, it would be a matter of finding someone that you feel comfortable to share this with. That's why therapists are great, because we're basically a stranger and we don't know your people. And then the second thing, if you're asking this question because you want to know how to help a friend, I would just sit there and listen. All right. I would sit there and listen, and I would sit there and be supportive. And then I would ask them, hey, have you ever thought about going to talk to a therapist? Because I don't know all the answers and I don't know how to do it, but I know that you probably need to go talk to somebody that can actually help you.
Wow. Yeah. Well, again, I always say, find those resources. We've had other guests before, and they say, "Look, if I can't help you, I will find somebody who can." I think majority of therapists will really, their heart at the end of the day is to help someone find that help they need. This is Cody Myers, one of our basketball players here and part of our state championship track team. And he asked, "Have you ever felt like you had no one? And if so, how did you deal with it?"
Hmm. I came from a big, loud family, so I had people. My circle is very small. I only focus on people who have my best interests at heart. So the feeling of no one, that doesn't resonate with me. But if I didn't have anyone, I would start building my tribe. Okay. So tribe does not have to be your family, right? Because everybody's family is not necessarily there to love you and support you. But there are people who are available that are part of your soul family, your soul tribe. Okay. And I found a lot of friends in college. So if you're going off to college or if you're going off to work, there are people there that you can connect with. It's about making yourself open and available to understanding that even though you're disappointed that maybe you don't have the family or the support that you wanted, how can I keep myself open to find people who actually want that? Because those people exist.
Absolutely. All right, let's got one more, and this is Quayshawn Sutton, and he asked, "What made
Hey,
you
for
go into
sure.
this type of counseling instead of other areas of counseling?"
You. Um, what made me go into this area is I love families, first of all. So I'm a couples therapist, and I also treat anxiety, and I work with individuals and I treat anxiety and depression and trauma. So the biggest thing for me is that when I was your age, 16 years old, I was riding on the school bus, which I hated, but I overheard these guys behind me talking about he was celebrating his 16th birthday. And I'm very nosy. I think that's why I'm a therapist too, because I like just listening and cracking codes. But he was telling this guy that how he celebrated his birthday. And what he said was really the turning point for me, because before then I had never thought about becoming a therapist. But he told his friend that the reason that he was so excited last night is because he smoked weed with his dad. And mind you, now some of y'all may smoke and you may smoke with your family members, but I was 16. The year was before Biggie Smalls got killed. If that'll tell y'all something, before Biggie and Tupac got killed, I was 16. So this was 2000, oh, not 2000, 1996. 1996, when drugs and sexuality were still things that we really didn't talk about out loud. So from that day on, it really made me question like people's families and what kind of parent would actually do that with their kid. He's in jail now, so like that happened,
Wow.
and I just credit it to just poor decisions from his parents and not really having. Eventually, when you become adult, you have to make the choice on your own. But that is the thing that made me really want to focus on families and understanding how to strengthen the family. And so that's when I went into that. I got really frustrated working with working with kids as a school-based therapy, because I would work with like kindergartners, ninth graders, and I saw that they were growing up in the same families that I dealt with on the school bus, and I didn't feel like I was getting anywhere. So now I help people understand and strengthen their relationships, and if I can
Yeah.
help you strengthen your love life, your kids are gonna be amazing. So I go in the back door. I love talking about love.
That's awesome. Well, we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But before we go, first of all, tell us where to find your website for all of your resources, because you got some great things on there.
Thank you. Thank you. Please go to roslynashford.com. Please leave that information for them. But Ashford, my therapy practice is New Leaf Therapy. I'm licensed in Mississippi, Texas, or Florida. If you're interested in services, I only work with people who are 18 years and up. So once you turn 18, seniors, y'all give me a call and reach out. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. And also, I'm on Instagram at Roslyn Ashford.
Yeah, and now before we go, you hit on so many important things. But just before we go, reiterate on the fact that these kids getting ready to transition from high school, these stressors are going to come. Unfortunately, it's an obstacle we all have to deal with. How can they be prepared to deal with these changes after high school?
Yes. So changing is inevitable. One thing, get you some real friends. So a real support system is going to help buffer the stress between you and the transition that you're going to make. Make your decisions slowly, because sometimes we jump impulsively into something and now we're in a hole and we don't know how to get out of it. So be careful and make decisions slow. And I guess if I had to come up with a third one, ask for help. A lot of times we're afraid to ask for help. We feel shame, we feel guilt for things that we have done or what we're experiencing. But just know, everybody literally is not doing it, but everybody is going through it.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you so much for taking some time in your busy schedule today. Dr. Roslyn Ashford, Laurel, Mississippi, New Leaf Therapy, roslynashford.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Y'all have a wonderful week and God bless.
All right. Thank you so much.